Following the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II, the Soviet Union engineered the installation of communist regimes in most of the countries occupied by Soviet military forces at the end of the war, including Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, and the GDR, which together with Albania formed the Comecon in 1949 and later a military alliance, the Warsaw Pact. The beginning of the Cold War saw the Eastern Bloc of the Soviet Union confront the Western Bloc of the United States, with the latter grouping becoming largely united in 1949 under NATO and the former grouping becoming largely united in 1955 under the Warsaw Pact. As the Soviet Union already had an armed presence and political domination all over its eastern satellite states by 1955. The pact has been long considered superfluous, and because of the rushed way in which it was conceived, NATO officials labeled it a cardboard castle. There was no direct military confrontation between the two organizations. Instead, the conflict was fought on an ideological basis and through proxy wars. Both NATO and the Warsaw Pact led to the expansion of military forces and their integration into the respective blocs. The Warsaw Pact's largest military engagement was the Warsaw Pact invasion of Czechoslovakia, its own member state, in August 1968. Since the end of the war, the USSR installed a Soviet-style regime in the Soviet occupation zone of Germany and later founded the GDR, with the country's political system based on a centrally planned socialist economic model with nationalized means of production, and with repressive secret police institutions. Under party dictatorship of the said Sozialistische Einheitspartei Deutschlands, Socialist Unity Party of Germany. Similar to the party dictatorship of the Soviet Communist Party in the USSR at the same time, a parallel country was established under the control of the Western powers in the zones of post-war Germany occupied by them, culminating in the foundation of the Federal Republic of Germany in 1949. Which initially claimed to be the sole legitimate power in all of Germany. East and West. The material standard of living in the western zones of Berlin began to improve quickly, and residents of the Soviet zone soon began leaving for the West in large numbers. Fleeing hunger, poverty and repression in the Soviet zone for a better life in the West, soon residents of other parts of the Soviet zone began to escape to the West through Berlin. And this migration, called in Germany, Republikflucht, deprived the Soviet zone not only of working forces desperately needed for post-war reconstruction, but disproportionately highly educated people, which came to be known as the brain drain. In 1948, in response to moves by the Western powers to establish a separate federal system of government in the Western zones, and to extend the U.S. Marshall Plan of economic assistance to Germany, the Soviets instituted the Berlin blockade, preventing people, food, materials and supplies from arriving in West Berlin by land routes through the Soviet zone. The United States, the United Kingdom, France, Canada, Australia, New Zealand and several other countries began a massive airlift, supplying West Berlin with food and other supplies. The Soviets mounted a public relations campaign against the Western policy change. Communists attempted to disrupt the elections of 1948, preceding large losses therein, while 300,000 Berliners demonstrated for the international airlift to continue. In May 1949, Stalin lifted the blockade, permitting the resumption of Western shipments to Berlin. The German Democratic Republic, the GDR, East Germany, was declared on 7 October 1949. On that day, the USSR ended the Soviet military government which had governed the Soviet occupation zone, Sowjetische Besatzungszone, since the end of the war, and handed over legal power to the Provisorische Volkskammer under the new constitution of the GDR, which came into force that day. However, until 1955, the Soviets maintained considerable legal control over the GDR state, including the regional governments, through the Sowjetische Control Commission, and maintained a presence in various East German administrative, military, and secret police structures, even after legal sovereignty of the GDR was restored in 1955. The Soviet Union continued to maintain considerable influence over administration and lawmaking in the GDR through the Soviet embassy and through the implicit threat of force which could be exercised through the continuing large Soviet military presence in the GDR, which was used to repress protests in East Germany bloodily in June 1953. East Germany differed from West Germany, Federal Republic of Germany, which developed into a Western capitalist country with a social market economy and a democratic parliamentary government. Continual economic growth starting in the 1950s fueled a 20-year economic miracle, Wirtschaftswunder, as West Germany's economy grew, and its standard of living steadily improved. Many East Germans wanted to move to West Germany,